morning, everybody, and welcome to Lecture 3 of English 100B. Once again, as usual, we'll start the day with some reminders. The first one is this. As of today, you should have watched telecasts 1 and 2 for lessons 1 and 2. And also, you should have turned in your green sheet contract. It should be pages 1 through 4 from laying out the text, and it should be stapled, signed, and dated. Bring it to the site indicated in your course syllabus. All of you should be making and adding onto a grammar review cassette tape on a daily basis. Every time we cover a new rule, you should be adding it to that tape. You should be listening to it at least one time a day. You should also be supplementing anything you need help with on the online grammar tutorial, because it follows what we're doing very closely with a series of self-correct exercises. And do remember that the URL for that website is grammar.deanzacollege.org, no spaces. Lastly, you should be very sure that you are subscribed to your class listserv, because that's the way you get listserv memos for assignments that are due. So instructions for how to subscribe, if you haven't already done so, will be given in your course syllabus, and the due dates on listserv memos will remind you when assignments like the 4-paragraph diagnostic essay and the email score for listening test number 1 are due. Well, today we have 2 exercises that we're putting our concentration on. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to exercise 2 in laying out the text on pages 65 to 69, where we get additional practice in locating subjects and verbs in questions. And then we're going to go to exercise 2 in setting up the palette, starting on page 37, going through page 46, where we'll get some practice in locating verbs in simple sentences. I'm going to stop you after that point to say something about changing your reading habits. And there is a page of instructions that we'll look at in the Setting Up the Palette book on page 69. And I'm going to give you 2 written assignments to do before our next lecture. That will complete the work we have to do on the simple sentence. Exercise 3 in Setting Up the Palette will go from pages 47 to 54, and that will give you practice in locating subjects in simple sentences. And then exercise 4 in the same book on pages 55 to 68 will give you extra practice in locating subjects and verbs in simple sentences. Scott raised a question, I think it was Scott the other day, about books written on Vermeer, and he didn't phrase it exactly that way, and I told you that Vermeer himself didn't write anything that we can look at, but that there are a number of excellent books out there that will help you to fill in the gaps of what Vermeer's life was probably like growing up in Delft and becoming an artist in that town a little bit more than 300 years ago. So I have some reading material, just little brief passages that I'm going to go through, because I will suggest books from time to time that you might choose to read that are written very well that will fill in the gaps for you on Vermeer himself. We're going to get into his life proper when we start exercise, the one that asks us to locate verbs, and we're looking at the narrative that was composed by Tracy Chevalier based on a very good deal of historical research on her part. So I want to go back to page 35 first in the Setting Up the Palette book before we look at the questions that you wrote. And I just remind you of what you're up against when you're looking at a question. When you're trying to analyze a question in terms of its structural qualities, you follow these steps, and it makes it very easy. First, you read the question, and then you turn it into a statement. But the important thing to remember is that you don't add, you don't subtract, you don't change words. You simply get the opportunity to rearrange the words that were in the original question. After that is rearranged, you can locate the subject and the verb quite easily, because the sentence will now be written in normal word order, and then you track your answers back to the question format, and you mark the subject and verb parts in that way. And there's one thing you need to be mindful of. If your question has a verb that consists of more than one word every single time without exception, the verb is going to divide around your subject when the sentence is written as a question. And the verb parts will go back together again when you write that question as a statement. Another reminder, not all questions are turned into statements. and sometimes a question word simply acts as the subject of a question, but it's also in normal word order. We looked at two examples. This was one of the final things we did in the last lecture that illustrate that particular point. If you look at these examples that are in your book on page 36, what took place in the book called Girl with a Pearl Earring, we said that what was the subject, took place meaning happened was the verb, that formed a main clause, that it formed a simple sentence. And in the second example, who was there to write about, it was a very similar picture that we painted. Who was the subject? Was is the verb. It's a main clause. It's a simple sentence. And in both examples, you have normal word order. The question word is simply acting as the subject. Now, before I check your answers to the examples that you wrote out for me, is there any question about that? Any question about questions? No, good. All right, so this is what we did. You went to laying out the text on page 65, and this is what I had asked you to do. I said, it's going to give us some practice in locating subjects and verbs in questions. I asked you to write 4 questions right off the top of your head on the lines provided without any analysis. And then when you got the 4th question written, you were to go back to question 1 and start rewriting each question as a statement by simply rearranging the given words. And once you had that rearranging accomplished with your statement in normal word order, you would then put 1 line under each subject, 2 lines under each verb, and track yourself back to the original question and mark the same subject and verb words that were in those questions. And you remember the format that we had to follow looked like this. On page 67, you were to write out your question, and then you were to do a rewrite and analyze the rewrite, then analyze the question. So I want to spot check what you did, and I'd like to do a couple of rounds of this. Farah, could you read me one of your questions? Good and loud.
Would you like to go to the movie this Saturday?
Would you like to go to the movie this Saturday? Turn it around.
You would like to go to the movie this Saturday.
Good. Your subject is?
You.
And your verb?
Would like to go.
Good. Perfect. That's exactly right. You as the subject, would like to go as the verb. Jeff, give me one of your questions.
Who would like to play baseball this weekend?
Where's your subject?
Who?
Yes. Where's your verb?
Baseball?
No. If you tried that on that verb check that we set up the other day, look what you get. I baseball, you baseball, he baseball. You know, it's not going to check out to be a verb. Got your dictionary? I see one. Farah has one. Pick up hers. Go to baseball. Just do a double check and see if baseball can ever, under any circumstances, be a verb. We found something peculiar the other day. I added it to my notes, Scott's example with their functioning as a noun. And he did that very quickly. It would have taken me at least a week to come up with an answer like that. Let's see if baseball can be a verb.
It's a noun.
It's a noun. Would you make a note on your question? So ask that question again. Read it to me just as you wrote it.
Who would like to play baseball this weekend?
I want your verb first.
Like to play baseball this weekend?
It can't be baseball because you just told me that baseball was not a verb.
Okay.
You want me to try this weekend on the verb check? I this weekend, you this weekend, he this weekend. It's not going to be a verb.
Yeah.
I just want your verb. Look at it again. Okay, you know what? I'm going to help you on that. Don't do anything at all. Just relax. I'm going to write that one out. Who, is that right? Mm-hmm. Would like to play baseball this weekend? Is that how that ended?
Yeah.
I have a question before we go any further. Did you try to rewrite that as a statement?
I just put, you would like to play baseball this
No,
weekend.
because remember, you can't change words.
Yeah.
So let's let that go. I just wondered what you did with that. I want you to find the complete verb. What do you say it is?
To play?
That's 50%. Where's the other 50%?
Would like?
Good. So your whole verb is what?
Would like to play.
That's right. We've eliminated baseball. You told me that was a noun. We know this weekend isn't going to pass muster as a verb. So where's your subject? Jeff, tell me something. When you look at a clause, normally speaking, do you expect to find the subject in the beginning, the middle, or the end?
see any.
I do too. Look at this example and tell me where your subject is.
Who?
Yes, couldn't be anything else.
Mhm.
Now, what kind of a clause did that give you?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence does it give you?
Simple sentence.
And in your case, you had nothing to rewrite. You know why? Because your question was in the proper word order to begin with, right? There was nothing to turn around there. That was like those samples that we looked at a minute ago. You already had it in proper word order. Let's try one of yours, Jessica. Read a question for me.
Can you go there now?
Turn it around.
You can go there now.
How about a subject
You
and a verb?
go.
Now, you're missing a piece of this. Here was your question. Can you go there now? I'm not going to deal with your question. I'm going to deal with this. You can go there now. Remember that the whole reason to take that question and turn it into a statement is so that the key structural parts you're looking for are obvious to you. What did you say the subject was?
You
What did you say the verb was?
go.
And you gave me 50%. Where's the 50% you didn't give me?
There.
Let's try it out. I there, you there, he there, we there, they there. Does that sound like a verb to you?
And then it's can.
It's got to be can go, right? Now, in your question, you said, watch the reason and the logic for doing this. Can you go there now? The problem was your verb was divided around your subject. When you turn it into normal word order, then your subject comes first and your verb parts go side by side. As you mark it in your question, it should look like that. Okay, Kim, can I have a question?
Do you have a car?
Turn it around.
You do have a car.
Where's your subject?
You
And your verb?
do have
That's right. What kind of a clause is that?
main clause.
And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
It is indeed a simple sentence. Yes, I have a car, but I don't drive one because I am a very poor driver. I told some of you that story before. In high school driving behind the wheel, I thought I was doing pretty well until I read what the instructor wrote, which was menace on the road, no indication of becoming a driver. Of course I failed the class, and my mother immediately enrolled me in the Beverly Hills driving school. And when I went to take my test, this is a warning in case you ever see me driving down the street. I parallel parked behind 4 poles, and the instructor said, whoever gives the test, so you can come out now, and I couldn't. He thought I was nervous. No, I'd still be there behind those 4 poles. So I don't drive very much at all. How about you, Ben? I'd like a question. That's a true story. That's a true story. Ben, can I have a question?
Do you listen to music?
Do you listen to music? Turn that around for me.
You do listen to music.
Good. Where's your subject?
You
How about your verb?
listen.
Okay, listen to me carefully. Do you listen to music? You turned it around and you said, you do
Do is my
listen to
verb.
music. So my subject is what?
You
And the verb?
do
Now you only gave me a half.
listen.
Right. You gave me 1/2 the first time, 1/2 the second time, but it's really do listen. And those
Okay.
parts go together again when you turn it into a statement.
Right.
Elbelin, give me a question.
Do you like to read novels?
Turn it around.
You do like to read novels?
Where's your subject?
You?
Where's your verb?
Do you like to read?
Good. Perfect. That's exactly the answer. Scott, give me a question.
How are your classes?
Turn it around.
Your classes are how?
Now notice how awkward that sounds? Your classes are how, but you're not tuned into awkward. For structural analysis, you just want to turn this around. Where is your subject?
Classes
Where is your verb?
are
What kind of a clause?
main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
Okay. Yvonne, give me one of your questions.
Have you ever been to Rome?
Turn that around.
You have been to Rome ever.
Where's your subject?
You
Where's your verb?
have been.
That's right. No, I haven't, and I'm an Italian. It's really an embarrassment. Someday soon. I went to Holland. Italy's next on my agenda. Jerry, can I have a question?
May I ask a question?
Turn it around.
I may ask a question.
Subject.
I
Verb.
may ask.
Good. That's exactly right. Janice, let's hear a question.
Have you made a web page?
Turn it around.
You have made a web page.
Where's your subject?
You
Where's your verb?
have made
What kind of a clause?
main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
Very good. Vince, let me have a question.
Can you take me outside?
Turn it around.
You can take me outside.
Where's your subject?
You
Where's your verb?
can take.
Can take. Pippa, a question.
I have an issue with one of my questions. Is that for here to go? Then for here to go is that?
No, because you're still asking a question.
So,
All right, now wait, now
wait.
stop right there. Just
Help me.
stop, don't go anywhere at all. Let's start with the question. And you don't want to wind up with a question. Is that,
is that for here or to go?
I got it, for here, she must be getting hungry, or to go. Now, listen to what you have to do. You're going to turn it into a statement.
That is for here or to go.
That is for here or to go. In your rewrite, where's your subject?
That
Where's your verb?
is.
In your question, when we track it back, where's your subject?
That
And your verb.
is.
Right, so your question is inverted, often the case. And it gives you what kind of a clause?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
If you look at your rewrite, that is for here or to go, what kind of a clause do you get?
Main.
Main. What kind of a sentence do you get?
Simple.
Right. Okay,
Okay,
that was
thank you.
simple enough. You're welcome. Scott, let's have a question.
Is this a pair?
Turn it around.
This is a pair.
No, because, oh yes, this is a pair. Yes. Where's your subject?
This
Where's your verb?
is.
Yes, we're all hungry. We're all thinking about food this morning. Justin, give me another question.
When is the homework due?
Turn it around.
The homework is due when?
Yes. Your subject is,
Homework
and your verb?
is.
Yes, that's right. Maritza, a question?
Am I learning English grammar?
Turn it around.
I am learning English grammar.
So your subject is,
I
and your verb?
am learning
Yes. What kind of a clause?
main class.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
And who has a question? Who has a question about questions? Scott?
How often do questions cause inversions?
Most of the time. But you see exceptions. I mean, we came up with a couple right today.
Right.
They don't always do that, but usually they do create inversions. And often your question word in your verb is only one word long, but it can be more than one. And remember, when that's the case, it's going to divide around the subject.
Right.
Jeff, a couple of you I'd like to do a redo on. Can I hear a different question? I want to make sure you've got this.
Okay. Do you watch wrestling on Mondays?
You watch wrestling on Mondays. Turn that around.
You do watch wrestling on Mondays?
Okay, that's right. Now, where's your subject?
You?
Yes, you. Where's your verb?
Watch?
That's 30%.
Wrestling?
67%.
On?
I on? No, that's a strikeout. I on, you on, he on, we on. Here was your question. Do you watch wrestling on Mondays? Here was your turnaround. You do watch wrestling on Mondays. So I agree with you about
Okay.
the subject, you, and where's your verb?
Do watch wrestling?
Exactly. Who else was stumbling? Who else was having a problem? Anybody? Jessica, did you have a problem? Yours went smoothly?
I guess.
Did anybody have a problem? Anybody want to redo?
I had a problem.
Pippa has another problem. Let's look at one more problem.
Okay. Who was that actress in the movie we saw last night?
Okay?
That actress in the movie we saw last night was who?
Exactly.
And the subject would be who.
Uh-huh.
The verb would be was.
That's right. And you're right.
Thank you.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we have the problem solved on questions, and I don't think you're going to do any stumbling on that at all. So I think we can say we'll move from that to another aspect. Actually, I want to do the exercise 2 on locating verbs in simple sentences, because that's next, and it's kind of long. Yvonne, you looked like you wanted to ask a question, do you? Okay. Let's take a look at page 37. Let's just
Sure.
go over the instructions. Yes.
Sometimes in the question, the subject can come before the verb. Like,
Yes.
for example, what is for dinner?
And what would you say the subject is there?
What
About the verb?
is?
Yes.
So,
And you're the second one who came up with that, at least the second one this morning,
Right.
and that's like, who is there? What is this book about? It can be.
Yeah.
Sometimes the question word can be your subject.
Okay.
Your example was better than mine. Good. So let's go to page 37, and let's look at locating verbs in a simple sentence, and here are the directions. It says in each example, the subject of the main clause has been underlined once. And then you remember the job that we took on for ourselves was to put 2 lines under each verb. And I told you the most important part of this particular exercise is to write the verb word or words in the blank space to the right. Because when you're writing out those verb words, just as we were doing a minute ago on questions, it automatically reinforces your awareness. This is a verb. This is a verb. And at the moment, that's what we're struggling with. So we had a look at the sample that was in the book. We had a look at this actually on the last lecture. The novel, Girl with a Pearl Earring, written by Tracy Chevalier, is based on a series of imagined incidents laced with historical facts about a young lady named Greet, a town called Delft, and the master painter Johannes Vermeer. And this was in the book. It was already marked for us. We said the subject word was novel, and the verb was is based, so 2 lines would go under that. I'd make a note that you were looking at a main clause, that you were looking at a simple sentence, and then take that extra step and write is based out in the blank provided. You're reinforcing that you're looking at a verb. Okay? By the way, has anybody read that novel aside from me? It's one worth looking at. We'll see if we trigger an interest in that particular novel, because we're looking right now at the way Tracy Chevalier approached the subject matter of her book. Now, this first one is a nice, easy start, Farah. The year is 1664. I can see that the subject is year. Where's the verb? Is. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
And the last thing you would do would be to write the word is out in the blank to the right. As we go through these, there isn't going to be a question on that one. That one was pretty easy. But as we go through these, if you wind up with a question, hand up and we'll tackle it as we go. So in the next one, a tile painter living in Delft has been blinded by an exploding kiln. Justin, where's your verb? I can see that the subject is painter.
Been blinded?
I want to call that 67%. Take another careful look.
Has.
Has been blinded. And what kind of a clause do we get?
Main clause?
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
And so the next step would be to write it out in full. Don't make a shortcut. Has been blinded. Well, I have a question. What is a kiln, Justin?
I don't know.
Okay. Try in the back of the book first. That would be the first thing to do. And I honestly don't know whether kiln is back there or not. But that would always be the first place to check. No, relax, Jerry. See, the thing is, I don't care what a kiln is. I actually know what one is. As an artist, I have one in the garage. But I want to know how you improve your reading habits. That's what I'm really after. Just like we looked up cough the other day. So it's not in the book? You're right. The next step would be to go to a regular dictionary and look up kiln. And read it once for free.
Okay. It's a noun, and it's heated enclosure for burning, firing, or drying.
Read it again, because I want a shorter definition for you to have to write down, not that whole thing. I can skip the noun part. What does the word mean? Read it again, just as it is.
Heated enclosure for burning, firing, or drying.
Okay. What are you going to write down?
Something that warms something up.
Well, an oven will warm something up. Is that a kiln? Who's got another dictionary? I really would like, I'm going to help you with the definition on this, but I would like a better definition. I'll take this part. It was a heated what?
Enclosure.
Okay. Heated enclosure. For what?
Drying, firing, and
Burning.
Okay, let's just say you're not going to burn, for drying or firing, in this case, a tile. And a tile is going to be made out of what? Clay. You ever seen a tile, Justin?
Yeah.
What are they made out of?
Could be clay.
Yes. Pottery, right? Just like your dishes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you had some clay, is anybody else looking that up in a different kind of a dictionary and see if we get a better definition? Farrell, look it up in yours. You've got a paperback. I want to see if we get a closer definition. You have plates that you eat your dinner off of, that you eat your lunch off, that you eat your breakfast off. If I gave you some clay today and I had you make some plates, and we could do that. That would not be a problem. And I said, go ahead and fire that in your oven. There's no way you could do that.
No.
Why not?
Oven's not made for that.
In a way, a kiln is a kind of an oven. What do you get out of that, Farrah? Read it really loud.
a heated enclosure as an oven for processing a substance by burning, firing, or drying.
It doesn't give us a temperature. It's a really hot temperature, right? And usually a tile or a plate would be fired once, a bisque firing, and then you'd take it out and you'd paint it or you'd glaze it or whatever you might do, and then you'd fire it again, and that second fire would make everything sealed and right so that you could put it in your dishwasher at home. But this poor man, this is Greet's father, made his living in Delft, and we're going to talk about the kind of pay that artists made at that time. It didn't matter whether they were making tiles or painting portraits, the pay wasn't very good either way. And his problem was that either the tiles he had in the kiln were improperly loaded or he had too many. The whole oven, so to speak, exploded, and the poor man is blind. And that creates a problem. Let's take a look, actually, at what the Delft Pottery Factory looks like. The Delft Pottery Factory was really in existence. Here's a glimpse of it. It was in existence when Vermeer lived in Delft, and it's the only ongoing pottery making establishment that is still in existence today. It's a fabulous place to visit. If you look on your screen at the far left, that would be a pot, a vase, whatever it might be, that has gone through, ready to fire perhaps. And the next one, which is still plain, might have gone through a bisque firing, initial firing. And then the painting process starts. And after it's painted completely, it goes back in the kiln again for a certain period of time. And then it comes out to be that beautiful vase that you see at the end. It's a very labor-intensive process, and people who work in a kiln work in a very, very hot environment. So, Greet's father, the kiln exploded, he's blinded, and look at this. The skin surrounding his eye sockets has been permanently sewn shut by a surgeon. I don't imagine people would handle it like that now, but that's the way they handled it in Vermeer's time. Skin is the subject. Jeff, I wonder where the verb is. What'd you mark?
Has been.
Has been, I want to call 50%.
Sewn up. Or sewn shut.
Do you see up in there?
No, sewn shut.
Sewn
Sorry.
shut. So the verb would be all of those words. What kind of a clause would this form?
A main clause.
It would be a main clause. And what kind of a sentence would it be?
Simple sentence.
And then take the time, people, to write down your verb. Has been sewn. And I want to make a comment about this verb. Sometimes when you're looking at a clause, a verb is one word long, and sometimes it's two, and sometimes it's 3, 4, 5. How can that be? If you have half verbs, this is a half verb, this is another half verb, this is another half verb, and I know in math you add a half and a half and you get a whole. Unfortunately in English you can add a half and a half and a half and you still get a half. This then becomes, in this particular sentence, a helping verb. So your verb takes all of those parts. Now we said something the other day, and let me hear your question, Pippa, and then I'll see if that's what you're going to ask.
Wait, it's actually about that sentence.
Go ahead.
At the end of that sentence where sewn shut was part of the verb, how is it that has been, why couldn't it just be has been shut or has been sewn? Why does it have to be has been sewn shut?
Well, these half verbs all go in together, and that's partly the answer. Remember what we said about a word ending in ly the other day?
Yeah, that doesn't count.
It's a word interrupter, and because it ends in ly, you know it's not going to be a verb. These pieces of the verb can go together and they make perfect sense. I'll get rid of permanently for you. The skin surrounding his eye sockets has been sewn shut permanently by a surgeon.
Okay. Okay.
See, those words can
Yeah.
go right back together and they fit beautifully. Anybody else with a question on that? Pretty bizarre, right, though? Your father gets blinded by an exploding kiln, and now not only can he not see, but his eyes have been physically sewn shut. Of course, the man became very depressed because he was out of a job, and he created a problem. And here's the problem that he created. He could no longer earn money to provide for his wife, his 10-year-old daughter, Agnes, or his 16-year-old daughter, Greet. And Greet, of course, is going to turn out to be the heroine of this novel. So, Maritza, if he is the subject, where is your verb?
Can. Earn.
Can earn. And what kind of a clause do we have?
A main clause.
What kind of a sentence do we have?
A simple sentence.
So you would write out can earn, job done. Does anybody have a problem with that sentence? Yes, Justin?
Wouldn't provide be a verb?
Yes, it is, actually, but I want you to put 2 lines under to provide, and I want you to put a half above it. It's a half verb, and the key to seeing that as a half verb is the word to.
Okay.
If I say, I to provide a lesson for you, I to provide a book for you, you can tell that's incomplete. How do you know it's not part of the main verb? Try and piece it together and see if what you have left makes sense. You'd get this. He can no longer earn to provide money for his wife. No, that's really a verb phrase or a half verb, not part of the main verb at all. Question, Scott?
What is no longer in that sentence?
Look up, no is going to be a modifier and longer is going to be another one, and I'm going to guess that it's probably an adverb. Take a look at longer in your dictionary and let's see what we get. Who's got one? Who's got that nice electronic one? Maritza, take a look at longer. So you never have to live with mystery.
It's an adjective.
It's an adjective? And how about no? What do you get on
It's
that?
an adverb.
All right. So either of these words are noun, verb, modifiers, one way or the other. They're certainly not going to be verbs. Okay? Now, this man's lifetime dream was that one day he and his son would run a pottery making business on their own. Didn't happen, right? Because the father is blinded. So look at this. Money set aside for his 13-year-old son has made it possible for Franz to begin a labor-intensive apprenticeship consisting of making tiles at the Delft pottery factory. Jerry, if money is the subject, what would you say is the verb?
Has made it?
Well, I'm going to try it. Can I say I, it, you, it, he, it, we, it, they, it?
No.
So I want a revised answer.
Has made.
Has made. And what kind of a clause does that give us?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence does it give us?
Simple.
I bet some of you answered this a different way. I could be wrong. I'm going to check that out. Anybody disagree with Jerry? Anybody mark it in a different way? Let's try Vince. What did you say?
I have has made, but I also have set aside.
Okay. Well, you're right about set. It is a verb. And if I tell you that I'm picking up a book now, I set this book down, then it's going to be a verb and it's going to be a whole verb. Problem is with English, things keep hopping around. Did we do the thing with hand the other day, H-A-N-D, and I asked you what part of speech that was? I'm going to do it again right now. Hand is what part of speech? What comes to mind first? What is it, Pippa?
Subject.
A noun.
Noun.
Right? So again, if I say Janice has a small hand, it's a noun. But remember, if I say Janice, hand me your pen, it's a verb. And if I said Janice was wearing a hand-knit sweater, it would become part of an adjective. Well, these verbs operate the same kind of strange way. Set in this particular case is a half verb. Now, I want to give you a different example to make that point, and I'll go right back to that sentence because that's where I was looking for the stumble. If I say to you, last year, and make a note on this if you need to. Last year, I decorated a tree for Christmas. We're getting all of that on there. That's my first example. And my second example is last year, a tree decorated for Christmas. In the first example, I have a subject and I have a verb and it gives me a main clause and it gives me a simple sentence. In other words, decorated is a whole verb. In the second example, tree is the subject. Decorated turns out to be a half verb and I wind up with not a sentence but a fragment. But what I want you to see is that both examples are dealing with tree, they're dealing with Christmas. One is a sentence, one is a fragment. Now you can say to yourself, oh, well, okay, I see, because in the first case it's active, in the second case it's passive. Yes, But that won't always be the case. Question, Jerry.
What happened to I?
I took it out.
Why?
I wanted to.
But you rearranged it and you said you can't remove.
No, this is not a question.
No, all I'm showing you is that decorated, here's my key thing, what I'm illustrating right now, is that in this example, decorated is a whole verb.
Right.
In this example, decorated is a half verb. This is my point. I aside. I'm still talking about decorated. There's a lot of words that are similar in those two examples. Tree is used in both of them. Christmas is used in both of them. When I take I out, and I've set it up as I have the second one, in order to make a sentence out of it, I have to add a helping verb like was.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to show you is that a word like decorated can be a whole verb or a half verb. And I'm going to make a connection to the word set. Set can be a whole verb or a half verb. Now, in this example that we were looking at over here, imagine if you can that this sentence ended right after son. Money set aside for his 13-year-old son, period. Would that be a sentence?
No.
No, because set is a half verb. But what if instead I said, money has made it possible for Franz to begin a labor-intensive apprenticeship? That would be okay. So then my whole verb in this sentence is has made, and set turns out to be a half verb, because I can throw this part of it completely out. The sentence will not stand on set aside. But I could give you another example where I said I set this pen down, and set would function as the complete verb. Watch out, English is very tricky. Any other questions on this, Janice?
Is to begin a half verb?
Right,
as
you
well?
spotted it just like the one that we had a minute ago. To begin is definitely a half verb. I can't tell you, to begin a story now. I mean, I could, but grammatically speaking, of course, that would be totally wrong. Anybody else with a question? Yes, Pippa?
So half verbs only go together when it makes sense.
No, half verbs either are verb phrases that you can eliminate from the sentence. If they're part of your main verb, they have to have a helping verb attached.
Okay.
And the moment we start reviewing fragments, and we will, we'll deal with half verbs in detail.
Okay.
Okay? Let's try another look at the Delft Pottery Factory kiln area. This is where that explosion took place. And this is just as it is in Delft in the spring. The kilns are behind that gentleman who has all those pottery molds in front of him. The kilns are back there, and they're very, very hot, and people who put tiles in and out of those kilns have to have something stronger than the pot holders you have to put things in and out of the oven. And if things aren't taken out on time, the whole thing cracks, explodes, and not only can you lose your eyesight, but you've lost that whole batch of vases or dishes or cups that you were trying to fire. Very, very hot area of a pottery factory. And what happens in Europe is this, and you know it's still the case today. It's a very odd situation. If you want to be a weaver, I'm a weaver, here in the United States, there's really no school that really, there are a couple universities in the whole country, I bet it's not more than 6, where you can become a major as a graduate student in weaving and get a degree. But you know what? In England, it's not done that way. In Europe, it's not done that way. You want to weave? Well, then you become an apprentice weaver at a weaving establishment. What do you guess you do for the first year? You make tea for the weavers, really. And you sweep the floor. And you look a lot at what's going around. And if they need bobbins wound, they might trust you to wind some bobbins for them. The second year, things get a little bit more difficult. Remember, it's a 6-year apprenticeship. We were reading about that. You don't get next to a loom for sure until possibly year 3. And then you're doing things like warping the loom that nobody wants to do anyway. But you have to learn how to do that. And by the time you get around to really doing something, you're weaving a master weaver's work. Not the hard part, not the eyes, not the hands, not the face. That's for the master weaver. You're doing the background, you're doing the fill. And it's the same with the pottery people. You know, the first year, all they do is learn how to put the tiles in and take the tiles out. Put the tiles in the kiln and take the tiles out. Maybe they learn how to wedge clay. Maybe they learn how to make some simple molds. But they don't do the painting, they don't do the finish work until they've been there apprenticed. There's no university to go to. For a period of about 6 years, most of you would be walking around with a master's degree at that time. Now here's the story, again, of Girl with a Pearl Earring. And it says the story opens with Greet chopping up vegetables for the soup pot and placing them in neat pie-shaped wedges with a round slice from a carrot forming the center of this circular profusion of color. Kim, the subject here is story. I wonder where the verb is.
Opens.
Opens. I wonder what kind of a clause this is.
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So we would write down opens. Are you all happy with that? Yes? Go ahead, Jerry.
I would have said open with.
Well, if you tried with on your verb check, look what you get. I with, you with, he with, we with, they with. With turns out, if you looked it up in the dictionary, to be a preposition, not a verb. It doesn't pass that verb check. Don't lose that tool, because you can run it through mentally, and in about 10 seconds you can tell what you've got. In terms of what's going on, here's this daughter in this family, this 16-year-old daughter, right? And her mother's going to make soup. And as soon as she gets those vegetables chopped, the mother's going to take them all and dump them in the pot with the boiling water. But she's putting the carrots over here. And she's being very careful not to mix her colors. So the white onions are over here. And maybe the purple cabbage is over here. And the artist who watches her do this immediately becomes fascinated by her unusual interest in color. Take a look at 7. A man with soft gray eyes and his wife with blonde curls and a harsh, brittle voice enter the kitchen and ask the tile maker's wife about Greet's ability to live in their home, to do the laundry, to help care for their children, and to clean the man's studio on a daily basis. Ben, if man is my subject, where is the verb?
Ask.
Ask is one. I'll buy that. Elbelin, do you see another verb?
Enter.
Enter is another. Elbelin, what kind of a clause is this?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
The verbs are enter, / ask. Any disagreement? Any questions on that? Go ahead, Scott.
Why isn't wife?
Oh, got 2 of you, Scott. Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, Scott.
Why isn't wife another subject in that sentence?
Parenthesize with soft gray eyes. Oh, you're right. We've got 2 subject words. You're absolutely right. And I bet you that's what Scott was going to say as well. You're right. Good eye.
Because otherwise it would say a man enters the kitchen
That's right.
and asks.
You've got a sentence that looks like this. 2 subjects, 2 verbs. Good. You're absolutely right.
It's all about Scots, right?
Yeah, it's all about Scots. I guess there's something magic in that name. I'm
Scots.
going to have to remember that. Take a look at number 8. The man, not recognized by Greet, takes a closer look at the vegetable wheel and asks about the 2 different shades of white in the turnips placed next to the onions and the red cabbage strips intentionally set apart from the wedge of sliced orange carrots. Jessica, if man is the subject, where's the verb?
I have takes a closer look.
Well, I got to ask you about part of it. I a closer look, you a closer look. He a closer look, we a closer look. Does that sound like a verb to you?
No.
It's going to be what?
Takes.
And only takes. Is there anything else?
Asks.
Asks. And what kind of a clause do we get?
Main.
A main. What kind of a sentence do we get?
Simple.
Okay. And our verbs are takes and asks. Go ahead, Vince.
How about recognized?
Not recognized is going to be a half verb, just like set was a minute ago. If I said to you, the man not recognized by Greet, and I put a period there, would that stand as a sentence? No. But what if I said, the man takes a closer look at the vegetable wheel? So this is a half verb in this sentence. And it could be a whole verb in a different one. But here our verb is takes and asks. Anybody else with a question? Let's take a look at 9. Greet has separated the red vegetable slices from the orange ones by placing a pie-shaped wedge of chopped leeks between them to prevent the colors from fighting with each other. Very unusual activity for somebody who is just a 16-year-old girl. pretty much uneducated except at home. Janice, if your subject is greet, where's your verb?
Has separated.
Has separated. And what kind of a clause is it?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So we would write down has separated. Anybody with a question? Agree with that? Go ahead.
Would prevent be a verb as well?
Let's see. Has separated the red vegetable slices from the orange ones by placing a pie-shaped wedge of chopped leeks between them. Problem. To prevent. And that to, again, indicates a half verb, not a whole verb. Okay? The husband and his wife leave Greet's home after having been assured of her strength and her capacity to put in long hours on heavy work-filled days. Scott Koppel, where husband and wife are my subjects, where's the verb?
Leave.
And what kind of a clause is that?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Anybody with a question on that? Or a comment? Yes, Vince?
How about been assured?
Well, you could even take more than been assured. You can take having been assured. Okay? That's an interesting one. Assured is a half verb. Been is a half verb. Having is a half verb. And we're going to sort this out very, very soon. But I'm going to ask Scott for help here. If I put a beginning parentheses in front of after, and I took it all the way here, having been assured of her strength and her capacity, what would you be inclined to call that?
Prepositional phrase.
It would indeed be a very complicated phrase. And the half verbs are part of that phrase. We're going to get to phrases. But they're half verbs. I having coffee for lunch. It's never going to stand alone. I've been to the library yesterday. That won't stand alone either. And that ed ending, as we see, can indicate a whole verb or a half verb. 3 in a row. Question, Jerry?
None.
Anybody have a question? Okay. I suppose it would be Jan or Jan, Greet's father, reveals the identity of the man with the gray eyes. So if Jan or Jan is the subject, Jeff, where's my verb?
Reveals.
What kind of a clause?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
A simple sentence.
So my verb is reveals, and that probably is straightforward enough that nobody has a question about it. Am I right? Okay. Let's try this. This man who's watching the vegetables, he is the master painter, Johannes Vermeer, the head man of the Guild of St. Luke, the husband of Katharina Bones, and the father of their 5 children. Now, I know the other day we said that Vermeer had 11 children, but at the time this story is taking place, he's only got 5. There are either some who died or some to come, certainly some to come. Pippa, if he is your subject, where's the verb?
Is.
What kind of a clause is it?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Anybody with a question on that? Okay. Let's take a look at a painting done by Vermeer to get an idea of what he looks like. Not only are there no words written about him, but there are no paintings about him, and there are no photographs. This is actually a painting that Vermeer did. It's called the Procuress. You can see what's happening there in the background. This woman is being bought for the price of a drink and some money, and it's painted in full color, but I just isolated the corner. People think that that little portrait in the upper left-hand corner is likely to be a self-portrait by Vermeer. As he painted the painting, he put himself in it, in that one part of the painting. That's as close as anybody comes to guessing what he might have looked like, because nobody ever painted his portrait. Yes, Scott?
Why would they assume that that's just him in a painting just out of the blue?
Well, you remember the one that we looked at the other day, the history of painting, or the art of painting, and you saw him with his back to you sitting at an easel painting the muse of history? People assume that's him too. Well, they have nothing else to go on. And it's really interesting because when we get into a little bit more of the history of Vermeer in the book, one of the things he uses in place of a camera, because the camera hasn't been developed yet, is a camera obscura, which is a little pinhole kind of attachment with 2 boxes where you can look into just a little tiny pinpoint of light, and the image that you're painting is inverted, turned upside down, but you isolate it from the rest of the room. And the man who brings that particular instrument over to Vermeer to check his paintings with is Van Leeuwenhoek, and that was really a person. He developed the microscope. There are paintings of Van Leeuwenhoek. You can see portraits of Van Leeuwenhoek because he sat for a painting, but Vermeer never sat for a painting. Pretty much an isolationist, pretty busy, I can imagine, caring for those 11 children. And imagine, with no money to pay for bread over a 3-year period of time, so that there are 8,000 loaves of bread in debt, he still has to go and find somebody to work in the house because, oh yeah, that's another point. The clothes have to be washed, the clothes have to be ironed, the tablecloths have to be washed, they have to be ironed, and guess what? There aren't any washing machines at all. When I went to visit Tahiti not very many years ago, and I mean not very many years ago, in all of Tahiti, there was no laundromat on the island. Even the hotels had to wash their own sheets, their own towels, and put them on the lawn in the hotel in the daytime to dry them. So I'm telling you, with no money, he still had to find some way to get somebody like Greet to go help take care of all these kids running around the house so he could do his paintings. And he only did 2 a year, as I told you the other day. Well, Greet, much against her will now leave her home to work for Vermeer's family and will live in the Vermeer household headed by Maria Thins, the artist's mother-in-law. Vince, what would you say the subject is Greet, we can see that. What would you say the verb is?
Will leave.
I'll take will leave, be a whole lot louder. I think I see another verb, do you?
And will live.
And will live. And what kind of a clause does that give us?
Main clause.
A main clause. And what kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
A simple sentence. So we would write down will leave / will live. She has a whole lot of reasons for not wanting to go to Vermeer's house. One of them, as you might imagine, is she's grown up in her own house, and she likes her mother's cooking, and she likes their way of life, and she's never been out much, never went to school. Girls very often didn't do that. They would have stayed at home and been taught whatever they were taught by the family they lived with. And then to make matters worse, Vermeer, as I told you the other day, is now a Catholic. He started out a Protestant like Greet's family, but now he's a Catholic. So not only does she have to go and live in his house, but she has to live on the other side of town where she's never been and where she has a lot of fears. Well, then it tells us as a child, Greet enjoyed playing with Franz, that's her brother, and Agnes at the site of the 8-pointed star placed inside of a circle laid out with stones to mark the entrance to Market Square. Farah, if Greet is your subject, I wonder where the verb is.
Enjoyed playing.
Enjoyed playing. And what kind of a clause is that?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
And the verb is enjoyed playing,
playing.
right? I'm just reminding you again, we're going to write it out. Anybody with a question on that? Well, when Tracy Chevalier was writing this novel and doing research, and we'll see more about how she actually handled this at a later time, she went to Delft for 4 days and wandered through the town to see what she could see. And she came across this star at the entrance to Market Square. Now, she's calling this an 8-pointed star, and it triggered this particular element of the storyline of her book. Let's take a look at what it looked like. Quite frankly, I see 4 points on this star. I don't see 8. But there it is. When you walk into Market Square, you see this, looks to me like a 4-pointed star. To her, it looked like an 8-pointed star. Maybe she's counting those interstices in the intersection. And by the way, it's pretty hard to get a good shot of that star because in the daytime, this is now the 21st century, not the one that Vermeer was living in, and there are motorcycles parked all over that star, and you have to wait until everybody disappears for the day, or you can't get a nice, clean shot of that star. But Greet and her brother and her sister played on that star when they were children. Yes, Yvonne?
Carol, in that last sentence, isn't there another verb there, calling?
We could have missed one. Let's take a look and see. Yes, you're probably going to be right. As a child, Greet enjoyed playing with Franz and Agnes at the site. No, I don't see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, I don't see another verb on that. Well, let's try this. Here are these children, if you can imagine it, playing on that star at the entrance to Market Square. And it says the children took turns picking out a point on the star, and calling out the name of a bird or a church or a special kind of flower, and then raced along the path indicated by the star point in order to be the first one to spot that item. That was a favorite childhood game. Scott, if children is the subject, where are your verbs?
Took
Took is one,
and raced.
and raced. And what kind of a clause is this?
A main clause,
What kind of a sentence is it?
a simple sentence.
And so your verbs are took / raced. Question on this? Yes, Justin?
Wouldn't turns be a verb?
Turns. If you say, it's again another one of those words in English that can just hop all over the place, the chair turns around when I want it to, then turns can be a verb. But if you say, you are taking turns answering questions, then turn can be a noun.
Okay.
Take your turn. Take my turn. When you play a game, I lost my turn. So in this case, they took turns, which is acting as a noun. Maritza, you had a question as well.
No, I'm checking. I thought calling, but I think it's a half verb.
It is a half verb. You can tell because of that ing ending. That's the tip-off, right? So picking is another one. And they're just half verbs in this particular sentence. They're not attached to any main verb, any helping verb. Anybody else with a question? Take another look at Market Square. I'm standing on that star, and you can see behind me what would be Market Square and the buildings behind that. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Brigadoon. It's pretty empty now when you look at it, right? There's nothing there. But here's the thing. When I arrived in Holland on a Thursday, and it was on a Thursday, remember that if you're ever going to go to Delft, it was like walking into Vermeer's world, because here was Market Square, and you could go up one aisle and down the other, and you saw what he was talking about with the meat stall, the fish stall, the stall that sold bread, the stall that sold cheeses, fabrics for somebody who was going to make a dress. It was all there, and I thought, oh, well, kind of tired today. I'll come back and photograph it tomorrow. And you know what happened on tomorrow, which was Friday? There was like no market. It had completely disappeared, just like the village of Brigadoon does in the movie Brigadoon. And I wasn't going to be there long enough for it to open up again, I didn't think. But after asking desperate questions, I found that they did a mini version of Market Square on Saturday. But if you see it all set up, you're sure that's a permanent kind of a thing. And you can buy chickens, and you can buy their pig's feet, and you can buy tongues, and you can buy mackerel, and people eat fish raw in Holland, and they love it. It's a delicacy. I tried it. I'm just not quite used to that kind of a delicacy. In that star game that these people were playing, however, no one had ever chosen the point of the star leading to Papist Corner or the Catholic section of the city. Pippa, where's the subject? The subject is no one. Where's the verb?
Had.
And I want to say that's 50%.
Chosen.
And what kind of a clause is that?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
And I got another question. Had chosen. What's a papist?
No clue.
Let's
Is
look
it
it up in the back of the book. And it might or not might not be back there.
It is.
Okay?
Okay. Often capitalized, usually disrespectfully, a Roman Catholic who is a follower of the Pope, relating to Christian church having a hierarchy of priests and bishops under the Pope. A prescribed form of rituals centered in the Mass, having deep respect for the Virgin Mary and saints, unmarried priests, and a belief that the Pope is not capable of error.
Okay. So papist, you can make a real short note on that one, is going to be the equivalent of Pope's corner, right? And that's making a reference to the head of the Catholic Church. And so these particular children in Greet's family had never even walked in that direction, and now she's going to be living in a home that is in that direction. Let's just go just a little bit further. We'll just get a little bit of the history behind that. I mentioned it to you the other day. We'll see it here. Since the time of William of Orange's defeat of Philip II, a Catholic ruler from Spain, almost a century earlier, Greet's family members, like most of the other inhabitants of Delft, were dyed-in-the-wool Protestants. Kim, members is the subject. Where's the verb?
Were.
What kind of a clause is that?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So my verb is were. Question on that? All right, on number 18, we're going to take a look at this example. And I know you may occasionally see a spelling funny in your book. I saw it too, but we'll go with this spelling. These spellings change too. The Dutch ones do from source to source. This seems to be the most correct spelling for this address we're going to look at. And now, due to economic hardships, Greet must live in a Catholic household on Oud Langendijk and sleep in a cellar across from an image of the crucifixion painted by Master Vermeer, a Protestant converted to Catholicism because of his decision to marry into a Catholic family. Jessica, if Greet is the subject, where's your verb?
Must live.
Must live. And then what?
That's all I have.
That's all you have.
Yeah.
What do you have, Kim?
Painted.
No, painted is something we need to go back to, but it's not part of the main verb. Jeff, what would you say the main verb was? Must live is definitely one.
That's all I have is must live.
Farah, do you see another one?
Sleep.
Sleep? Right here. What kind of a clause, Farah, is that?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Completely missed that.
Simple sentence.
So our verbs, let's just take these down first, are must live, sleep, and painted by Master Vermeer. This is going to turn out with that ed ending to be a half verb. You really have to watch out for those ed endings because sometimes they're whole verbs, sometimes they're half verbs. This is definitely a half verb. Do you look like you have a question, Jerry?
Nope.
You sure?
Positive.
Okay. Anybody with a question on that? Let's try another one. Almost immediately, Greet is shown how to do several household chores by a 28-year-old servant called Tanika. So there are two servants in that household. Tanika is one, Greet is going to be the other. Yvonne, if Greet is the subject, where's your verb?
Is shown,
What kind of a clause?
main clause,
What kind of a sentence?
simple sentence.
And is shown is your verb. Question? Good, because that's exactly right. This sentence is tricky. Her first chore involves, I looked at it quite a bit last night. Her first chore involves walking down a flight of stairs, filling a large pot with canal water, hauling it back to the washing kitchen, heating it over a fire, adding laundry to it, and soaking it for a day before scrubbing it with soap, rinsing it, and hanging it outdoors to be bleached by the midday sun. All right, Pippa, go ahead and try this. Chore is the subject. Where's the verb?
My first one is filling, but I'm wrong.
No, it's
I mean,
just that you need to back up because there's something before
Walking.
you ever get to that.
Walking.
And you still need to back up.
Involves.
All right. So let's see what we get here. Involves walking.
There's more.
Involves filling. Yes, there is more.
Hauling.
Hauling,
Heating.
heating,
Adding.
adding,
Soaking.
soaking. That for sure. We'll come right back to this. What kind of a clause is it?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Now, this is a question I throw out to you. Let me just get some of those verbs going. It's going to be, for sure, involves walking, and that helping verb carries over. Involves filling, involves hauling, involves heating, involves adding, involves soaking. And for sure this is going to be a main clause. It's going to be a simple sentence. Are we done with verbs?
No, hanging.
Hanging.
Would rinsing.
If hanging is one, rinsing is one. And if hanging and rinsing are verbs, there's still another
To
one.
be bleached. No. No.
Scrubbing.
Anybody? Jerry, where would it have to be?
Scrubbing.
It would have to be scrubbing. Now, this was my question. This is what I was struggling with last night. I wanted to call before struggling it a prep phrase with a present participle phrase acting as the object. And if that's the case, rinsing and hanging go more to that. But no matter, with all these half verbs, we still basically have a main clause, we have a simple sentence, with some confusion about whether these last three half verbs are parts of phrases following the main verb or not. Scott, I see a question written right across your forehead. I just can't read it.
Because if the and soaking part throws it off as if it's the conclusion of the verb sequence going on.
That seems to me to be a logical closing of that verb sequence. But I tell myself it could be involves scrubbing, involves rinsing, involves hanging. So either way, we're still coming out with either a phrase and a main clause with multiple half verbs attached to this helping. This main verb right here involves attaching directly to that and creating a simple sentence.
Right, I agree. What throws me off, though, is if before scrubbing it, because
It did
that
the same
isn't
thing
an
with
actual
me.
prepositional
Right,
phrase,
it
but
did
the
the same
rinsing
thing
and,
with me.
and hanging part is not in a prep phrase.
No, it isn't in the prep phrase. It isn't. So we would say these two for sure and this one sort of doubtful.
Okay.
Okay? But a lot of half verbs attached to the main verb in any case. Do you notice the process? That's what this poor gal had to do to wash clothes. And eventually there would be like 11 children in that household, and she would be expected to wash all of those clothes by hand several times a week. I want you to see the canal in Delft. And this is right near Vermeer's house. And this is where she would have had to walk down. Can you see those stairs over there? That's the kind of canal steps she would have had to walk down with 2 pots actually, filling 2 pots and carrying them up one at a time into the house, heating them over sticks, whatever they made their fire out of, and then soaking the laundry for a day before it was washed. What I really want you to see in that slide is look at the cars on the edge of the canal. Can you see them parked? Mm-hmm. And there is no guardrail, there is no rail at all, and they are parallel parked with absolute precision. I told you most people get around Delft and Holland in general with bicycles. You wouldn't want to parallel a car like that in Delft. What happens if you miss? Guess what? Into the canal. Same story in Amsterdam, but in Amsterdam they're a bit more civilized. They do have guardrails, and yet they have a special crew, I think part of their fire squad, that fishes out at least 75 cars a year out of the canal. That's with a guardrail. In Delft, your chances would be even worse. So if you decide you're going to take a trip and it tells you, don't think about driving a car, figure they're right. Let's look at 21. After folding the dried garments and the household items, the household linens, she must scrub the underside of a flat iron with coarse salt to prevent it from scorching and burning before heating it over an open fire and ironing various items of clothing. Justin, if she is the subject, where's the verb?
Must scrub.
Must scrub. I wonder what kind of a clause that is.
Main.
And I wonder what kind of a sentence it is.
Simple.
Right. See how labor intensive just basic living was at this time? You get the picture? This wasn't plug the iron into the wall. This was heated over the fire and use salt on the bottom of it so it wouldn't scorch all of these white pillowcases and aprons and hats and things that people had as part of their daily life. Also look at this. When asked to do so, Greet must buy herring from the fish stalls or raw meat such as stewing beef, sausages, chops, tongues, and pig's feet at the meat hall in Market Square from a butcher with blood-stained hands and a bloody apron. And that becomes important later, that butcher with the blood-stained hands and a bloody apron. It becomes important to the story. Jerry, if Greet is the subject, where's your verb?
Must buy.
Must buy. I wonder what kind of a clause that is.
Must be a main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
So must buy is the verb. Questions on that? Have any of you ever eaten tongue? Quite good. You boil it, take the skin off, slice it. It's very good. How about pig's feet? Yes? Yes. We ought to have a banquet at the end, and we ought to have everybody prepare things like pig's feet and tongue. See what kind of delicacies they had. The fish stall in Market Square is one of many. This is a very modern one. This is in the spring of this year, and you can see all the different kinds of fish. There are millions of them, some of them in a barrel, salted herring for sure, that people eat whole. If you're really a man, you take a herring with a tail and you just eat it. Like that.
And the spine, too?
The whole thing. It's a delicacy. It's wonderful. So say the Dutch. Take a look at 23. Now, this was a tradition that was upheld in the time of Vermeer. Every time you had a new child, you had to have a big party. Look at the preparation. On the birthday feast after the birth of the sixth child, Vermeer's sixth child, greet must wash clothes, napkins, and tablecloths, polish silverware, help with the ordering of rabbits, oysters, lobsters, and a whole pig, and serve spiced wine to guests like Van Rietveen, a wealthy purchaser of Vermeer's paintings, while dodging his groping hands and his roving eye for what he calls the wide-eyed maid. And the wide-eyed maid, of course, is greet. Janice, if the subject is greet, where are your verbs?
Must wash.
Must wash.
Is help one of them?
Where's the next one?
Help.
Help.
And serve.
And serve. And what kind of a clause does that give us?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So your verbs are must wash / help / serve. A big job. Yes, Maritza.
What happened with polish?
Polish.
What happened to polish? Right there. Good. Let's add it in. Got left temporarily out. Good. Anybody else with a correction or an addition? But here's the thing that she was really hired for. But Greet's most important job is to clean the master's studio on a daily basis without disturbing items like a draped piece of blue cloth or a love letter selected for a painting. Yvonne, if job is the subject, where's the verb?
I said is.
More than is.
Is to clean.
Is to clean. Type of clause?
Main clause.
And type of sentence.
Simple sentence.
So that would be is to clean. Question? See, that half verb is part of the main verb this time because we have a helping verb in front of it. Yes, Janice?
Selected could it be a verb?
Selected, it says, let's back that up. The most important job is to clean the master studio on a daily basis without disturbing items like a draped piece of blue cloth or a love letter. Selected. It's a half verb. If you had a love letter selected for a painting and that's all you had, it wouldn't be a sentence, it wouldn't be a clause. For that to be a clause, it would have to say a love letter was selected. It's a half verb there, okay? The painting of Van Rietveen's wife, showing her wearing a yellow satin fur-trimmed mantle and gazing at herself in a mirror while fastening a pearl necklace around her throat, is a case in point. Elbelin, if painting is the subject, where's the verb?
Is.
Way down here. What kind of a clause is that?
Mean.
And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
And the verb is simply is. Right. Let's take a look at the painting that we're talking about right now. This woman with a pearl necklace, this is a very beautiful painting done by Vermeer, and one of several where he uses the model wearing this yellow, gorgeous satin ermine-trimmed cloak. And she's holding a pearl necklace in her hands. Now, all the time that that painting is being painted, anything that is a prop on a table can't be moved. So on number 26, Greet's ability to rest an elbow on the table while placing her thumb and another finger on an area earmarked for a letter, and then lifting the piece of paper and dusting under it with her other hand before placing it back in exactly the same spot, requires skill and patience. Ben, if ability is the subject, where's the verb?
To rest.
To rest is going to be a half verb because of that to. Scott, do you see it?
Requires?
It's going to be requires. What kind of a clause is that?
A main clause?
And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Okay, requires. Now the problem she was up against was this. Imagine this was a still life setup, these things that I have right in front of me, but it would have included draped fabric as well. When she dusts the site that he's painting from, remember he's going to be painting that painting for 5 or 6 months, she has to hold things like this, dust under them in such a careful way, imagine fabric in that way, so that when she puts it back, it's not moved at all. because otherwise it's going to destroy the still life that he has set up that's part of the painted scene. Now the wife, Vermeer's wife, Katerina, remember she's the one with the blonde curls and the brittle voice, is not allowed to set foot in her husband's studio. If wife is the subject, Maritza, where's the verb?
Is allowed to set.
All of that. What kind of a clause is it?
A main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
A simple sentence.
So is allowed to set. Question? Really? None of you slipped over not.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because not isn't going to pass that verb check, is it? I not, you not, he not, we not. It's going to alter the meaning of the sentence, but it's not, in fact, part of that verb. We're talking about that wife. She once knocked over and broke a wooden box with a lens called a camera obscura, owned by Van Leeuwenhoek, the inventor of the microscope, and used by Vermeer with a robe draped over his head to get a sharp, almost photographic view of a scene being painted with saturated jewel-like colors. He's often accused, Vermeer, of being a photorealistic painter who's cheating with a camera, but he didn't really have a camera. He just had this device. Let's try this, Scott. If she is your subject, where's your verb?
Knocked.
And then you have another verb.
Broke.
Does that do it? What kind of a
Used.
clause do we have?
The other verb is used.
Well, let's see. She once knocked over and broke a wooden box with a lens. Would you say that called was a verb?
No.
No.
Well, I did ask the wrong question. Is it a whole verb or a half verb?
It's a half verb.
It's surely a half verb. Called a camera obscura. Would you say that owned by Van Leeuwenhoek was whole or half?
That would be half.
And then if you said the inventor of the microscope, the renamer, and used by Vermeer, would used be a whole
half.
verb? It's another half.
So it's just knocked and broke.
So it's just knocked and broke. And what kind of a clause does that give us?
Simple. On main clause.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
A simple sentence, yes. Questions? With the passage of time, Katerina grows increasingly jealous of her husband's fondness for Griet and his habit of sending her on special errands to the apothecary's shop to purchase precious pigments and oils to be ground and mixed for the rendering of his paintings. Ben, if Katerina is a subject, where's your verb?
Grows.
Does that do it? What kind of a clause do we have?
Main.
What kind of a sentence do we have?
Simple.
Everybody agree? Are you reading what you're reading? Do you see what's necessary if you decide you're going to become a painter? It certainly isn't money, but you have to have the right equipment. What, Jerry, is an apothecary?
I thought an apothecary was somebody who did with corpses.
Oh, no. Look it up for me. Go to the back of the book. Definitely not.
That's what I was.
I wonder what you could be thinking of. Somebody who deals with corpses is
That's what I thought
Quincy.
an apothecary was.
And Quincy is a forensic person. Apothecaries don't deal with that.
On Friends, they bought an apothecary table.
Well, let's find out what apothecary means. What does
Okay,
it mean?
one who prepares and sells drugs or compounds for medicinal purposes.
More?
That's it.
Okay.
So
Actually, they do sell drugs, and it's absolutely right, but what happened in the time of Vermeer is you went to the apothecary shop to buy things like, can you imagine, a pig bladder? And what do you think you'd use that pig bladder for?
to hold inks.
To hold paint. And where do you think you'd get the oil paint to put in the pig bladder that you're going to use to paint this portrait?
I would say berries or something, but I don't
No,
know.
they had to grind lapis lazuli and different kinds of bones to get white paint, you know, something that was charred and burnt to get black. And then, once it was mixed with linseed oil, it went in something like a pig's bladder and had a nail stuck in the top so that it wouldn't dry out, right? I mean, it can't dry out while the artist is working. In other words, you couldn't go down to Aaron Brothers or some local university art store and buy Liquitex colors in the shades and hues that you wanted. You had to mix your paints. And you had to buy the raw ingredients, including the linseed oil, which would be used sometimes for medicinal purposes, from the apothecary. There was no art supply house. Take a look at 30. Tonike, Vermeer's model, for an earlier painting about a milkmaid, we'll see that later on, also becomes envious of the master's affection for Greet and his habit of asking her to help grind paints in the attic above the studio in place of spending more hours on chores, such as mopping floors, washing clothes, and caring for the children. Jeff, if Tanike is the subject, where's the verb?
Becomes.
Becomes. And what kind of a clause would that be?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence would it be?
A simple sentence.
Right. So becomes is the verb. Anybody with a question on that? And you can see the problem. You can see the problem that the Katerina wife has. Here, Greet is allowed to be in the studio any time of the day to dust off all the things that need to be dusted off, and she's allowed to grind those paints in the attic, and the wife can't even walk in the studio. She's such a klutz. When she knocks over the camera obscura, she's breaking a very expensive piece of equipment that Vermeer cannot afford to own. Cannot afford to own. I want to give you some assignments, but before I do, actually, I wanted to do some reading. And let me just tell you what I would like to read. I want to fill in some of the art historical gaps on some of the things that we're talking about. And one of them is Art versus Money. This is a book and a very interesting one. It's in our bibliography, and it's called, if I get a title on it, Vermeer, A View of Delft. And Anthony Bailey is the author. And on the cover of the book, you can see that painting I was mentioning a few minutes ago. This is The Art of Painting. And people think that's a self-portrait of Vermeer as well. They don't know there isn't any snapshot that you can compare to. But he's a very interesting writer who does fill in a lot of the gaps about Vermeer himself, at least conjecture-wise he does. He's an interesting writer. He's an Englishman. He lives in Greenwich in England, and he worked for The New Yorker. He wrote for The New Yorker for 35 years, and he's written 2 books on Rembrandt and 1 on Turner. So he's very interested in artists. And the way he tells us something that we might want to know about art and money in society today is talked about here. Paintings, and even tapestries for that matter, if they're done by fine artists today, sell for lots of money. Did you know that? For example, one of the weavers, I recently went to look at a weaving show, and one of the weavers I studied under, I looked at some pieces she has currently displayed, and one of her pieces sells for $50,000 and one's selling for $30,000. Doesn't mean anybody's bought it. And one is selling for $20,000. That's a lot of money. Of course, artists then and now didn't keep that money. At least half of it goes to a gallery, and sometimes 80%. But we're talking about thousands of dollars. Let's look at what it was like in Vermeer's time. Now Bailey is talking about portrait painters, and he says this: the makers of this generally down-to-earth art were for the most part small tradesmen, working at their craft as integral members of a society of artisans and merchants and farmers and seamen. They bought each other's products or produce for need and pleasure. A lot of it was pleasure. Paintings were to be seen in shops, inns, workshops, and markets. Many were bought cheaply. Some had been traded for wine, bread, or rent. They didn't get money for them. Among the painters, there were families like the Van Meervelds in Delft and the Van Mierizes in Leiden, where painting ran for several generations, passed on from father to son to grandson as the natural way of making a living. And there were painters who rose from their artisan background to take up a paintbrush instead of a cobbler's last, a shoemaker, or a miller's flour sack, or an innkeeper's barrel. Rembrandt's father was a miller, means he ground wheat. His brothers were a baker and a shoemaker. It was exceptional when an artist achieved the fame and fortune that Rembrandt did early on. 20 guilders, keep that in mind, was a good price for a picture at a time when the wages of a Delft cloth worker were, as noted, less than 1 guilder a day. And half that guilder had to be spent on bread. An artist had to paint a lot of pictures to stay ahead of the debt collectors. Most painters thought of themselves as craftsmen. And the guild they generally belonged to, as in Delft, was one to which artisans and middlemen in other crafts and trades belonged. Church patronage was a thing of the past, and really splendid private commissions were most often from abroad. The royal courts had pretty much stopped buying paintings. They paid a lot of money for paintings when they did it, but they'd stopped that for the most part. Now, here is an artist. This is a really interesting one. Adrian Brouwer, the Flemish artist who worked in Holland for part of his short life, 1605, 1638. His dates overlap with Vermeer, was thrilled on one occasion to receive 200 guilders for a picture. Do you know how many guilders, how much money that would be in American dollars today? About $89. 300 years ago, it probably wasn't even worth talking about. But look what he did. When he got home, he poured the money on his bed and rolled among the silver pieces. Then, Houbraken said, he spent most of it overnight and felt relieved that he had rid himself of all that ballast. It bothered him to have that much money at his disposal. So he threw it on the bed, rolled in it, spent it all in one night, went back to the position of being broke, and felt better. Now look at this. Let's just get some idea of money. 1 guilder, that's what an artisan earned in a day, is 45 cents in today's money. Half of that would have had to go to buy bread for the family. As you see, Vermeer couldn't buy bread for the family. He was behind, 8,000 bread loaves. 20 guilders said that was a good price to command for a painting, $8.91. That 200 guilders that artist rolled around in on the bed before he got rid of it that night, that's only $89. Typical for the time. You do realize, don't you, that Van Gogh was a painter also from Holland. How many paintings did Van Gogh sell? Anybody know during his lifetime? I think he sold a total of 1, and he got for it $85, a huge sum of money. 1! And now you wouldn't be able to touch a Van Gogh, right? So, history takes a while to catch up to artists. One other thing while we're on this book, and then we'll get off this book, that he talks about is what kind of education could you have received had you been Vermeer going to school at that time in the 1640s? If you were a girl, no problem, you didn't go to school. But what about a boy, and what about grammar school? There was school. At Ford, the infant school in a nearby house where Vermeer might have got early instruction in the ABCs. On grounds of expense and no real need for it, not all Dutch children were taught how to read and write. But his father could afford it. Why? That father had 3 jobs, remember? He wove silk, he ran an inn. Because artists were some of the people who drank beer in his inn, he hung their paintings up, because from time to time somebody would come and buy them. And so he became an art dealer as well. So he was a pretty wealthy man. First with chalk on a slate, then with a quill on paper, Vermeer would have copied words from a primer board. He learned the 10 Commandments and the Lord's Prayer. At 7 years old, he probably moved on to a school where arithmetic and the Bible were studied. At 12, there was the possibility of Latin school, calligraphy, classical studies, sacred history. In the Voldersgracht, a portrait painter named Cornelius Damon Rietwyk ran a small academy that might have served in this way for young Johannes Vermeer, teaching him, among other things, more advanced mathematics and drawing. There he would have been close enough for a fast run home, avoiding gangs of bullies who now and then staged battles with cudgels and sticks or pushed smaller boys who went to school into a canal. A notable battle took place in 1633, that's right at the time that Vermeer was born, between the boys of Rotterdam and Delfshaven on a dike where they threw stones very violently at each other, making holes in their heads. So that's what school life would have been for him. Of course, when he got past that point at age 15, he would have been apprenticed to a master painter, and it would have been 6 years until he turned 21 that he would have been working under somebody's guidance. So it's not like enrolling in a college and saying, well, I think I'll go here this year. I want to give you some homework assignments for the next lecture, if you would do these in advance for me. If you would go back to the palette book and take a look at page 47, I would like you to do the opposite of what we did today. Today we spent our time looking for verbs in simple sentences. Well, now let's spend some time looking for subjects in simple sentences. And in this particular exercise, every example is going to have the verb of the main clause as a given. It'll be underlined twice. You'll have no problem spotting it. Your job is to locate the subject. You're going to put one line under the subject, and this time you're going to write out the subject word or words in the blank space provided to reinforce your understanding of what a subject is. And I remind you again that writing out the subject words is going to reinforce your awareness of that subject component of a sentence. It's really important. Well, this next exercise takes us a little bit further into Greet's life. It says, in a very short amount of time, Greet's life becomes more complicated. Jeff, if becomes complicated is the verb, where's your subject?
Life?
Life? What kind of a clause?
A main clause?
What kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence?
Do we agree? Life becomes more complicated. Let's just get a start on that particular exercise. We'll get a jump start. Without any warning, there is an announcement of a quarantine in the part of Delft inhabited by Greet's family, preventing anyone from visiting the plague-infested part of the town for more than 10 days. Well, I see a verb marked is. Elbolin, where is the subject that goes with it?
Announcement?
Right, and before she got there, this would have been the procedure to follow. Is has 2 lines under it. I would have put a V above it. I would have boxed off the word there. I would have set a check mark above that. I would have asked myself, what is there, having located the verb, and I would have got what Elbolin got. Announcement is my subject, and I wonder what kind of a clause I have.
Mean?
And what kind of a sentence is this?
Simple?
And so we're going to write out this time announcement as the subject word, but I have another question. Vince, what is a quarantine?
No idea.
Look it up. Circle it. Again, we're breaking reading habits, remember? So circle quarantine. Look it up. And try the back of the book, and when you get it, give it a first reading for free. You just kind of want to get a general overview of what a quarantine is. What is a quarantine? Good and loud.
A restraint upon the activities or communication of persons or the transport of goods designed to prevent the spread of disease.
One more time. I want you to read it again. Because this time I'm going to ask you to shorten it. So read it again. Think.
A restraint upon the activities or communication of persons or the transport of goods designed to prevent the spread of disease.
So what are you going to write down? What is a quarantine?
Try to prevent spread.
Okay, yes, you're trying to prevent disease. That's true. I'm going to get that part of it down. But how do you do that?
Closing the area.
What do you do?
Closing the area.
Close an area. Close off an area, really is
close
what it
off
would
the
be,
area.
right? So you're going to close off an area, trying to prevent disease. That means nobody goes in,
Nobody goes
nobody goes out. I wonder what plague means. What does plague mean, Farah? Plague. Try it in the back. We're just about to talk about reading habits, so this is a good thing to do right now. Plague. Look it up.
An epidemic disease causing a high rate of mortality.
Okay, an epidemic disease causing a high rate of mortality. Somebody shorten that down so I can write it down. What are you going to write down? What are you going to write, Jerry?
A deadly disease.
A deadly disease. Accent on deadly. I want to know about one more word. Infested. I wonder what that means, Justin. Infested means what? Yeah, don't guess. See, this is the thing. I'm trying to change your reading habits, and I'm trying to push the point. If you have to look up 3 words in a sentence, it's okay. Infested.
To spread or swarm in over a troublesome manner.
Right. So what would you write down without all those words?
Spreading of.
How about contagious?
I'm going to say widespread. Yeah,
Widespread.
contagious, that's all of that could be. Widespread, contagious. Anybody remember anything about a major plague that took place in Europe? What one would it be, Jerry?
There was the Was it the red plague?
No, but you got the
It's,
right idea. It's a color.
The Black Plague.
The Black Plague. And the Black Plague was caused by what?
Oh, gosh. I thought it was poor distribution of, like, fecal matter, wasn't it?
It was worse than
Oh,
that.
rats.
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 And if you got bit, that was the bubonic plague, the Black Plague. If you got bit by a rat, you were all done. Well, we don't know what kind of a plague took place in Delft, but for sure 10 days she couldn't visit her family at all. And even if she had been allowed to go past the barriers, and she wouldn't have been allowed to go past the barriers, the mother-in-law of Vermeer said, absolutely not. You're not going to go and visit those plague-infested quarters and bring any disease back to our children. And there was a problem, because Griet's sister had caught whatever it was that was going on in the town at that time. So on sentence number 2, Griet's Sunday visits to see her family are brought to an abrupt halt. Are brought is the verb, and Janice, where's the subject?
Sunday visits.
Just one word, nail it.
Visits.
Visits. What kind of a clause?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
So visits would be right here, and they would be terminated. Okay, stop that for a second. Let me switch gears on you, and let me ask you to make a note also of exercise 4, because I want that done as well. So on exercise 4, if you go to page 55 for just a second, page 55. This time nothing is a given. You have to find everything. You're going to locate subjects and verbs in simple sentences, and by the time we get there, the storyline of Girl with a Pearl Earring will have advanced quite a bit. So the instructions tell you this. In each example, you're going to underline the subject in each main clause with one line. You're going to underline the verb twice. And then, really important, you're going to write the subject word or words in the first blank space and the verb word or words in the second blank space. And I remind you again, it's that writing out part that reinforces. I almost want to say painlessly, I'm looking at a subject, I'm looking at a verb. You know, it's like anything else that you've ever studied. If you were a pianist, does anybody play piano besides me? All right, a little bit. Every day if you sit down at the piano, where do you start? What do you play first?
I play my chords.
Scales, chords, right. And I don't care how good you get and how long you've played, you're always doing scales, hand and exercises, and there's a good half hour of that. If you were going to be a ballet dancer, Pippa, what would you do the first hour of the class? Probably
Warm up.
bar exercises,
Yep.
right? It never gets any different. So these are the scales for English, and they bear pattern and repetition. Look at our example on this one. In March of 1665, Griet turns 17, a year older than when we first met her. And this one's marked for you, so Griet would be your subject. You'd have put a line under that. You'd have put 2 lines under turns. You'd have labeled this a main clause. You also would have labeled it a simple sentence, and you would have taken the time to write out Griet and turns, which, by the way, in this case, also reminds you of the normal word order in English, right? Let's just try one example on this part. She finds herself drawn like a magnet to Vermeer's compelling personality. Jessica, where's a subject?
She.
How about a verb?
Finds.
Type of clause?
Main clause.
Type of sentence?
Simple sentence.
So you would write out she, and you would write out finds. I know you know what a magnet is, but tell me.
It's something that sticks to metal.
More than
I
sticks
guess.
to metal, yes. So if it sticks to metal and you have a magnet that's made of metal and you've got some paper clips sitting on the desktop, what happens if you take the magnet and aim it in the direction of those paper clips?
The paper clips get attracted to the magnet.
Right, and they stick to that magnet. Well, now she's becoming addicted to Vermeer. Told you a movie's going to be made based on this book, and one of my all-time favorite actors is going to play the title role of Vermeer, Ralph Fiennes. Do you like Ralph Fiennes?
Yes.
You don't even know who Ralph Fiennes is. Oh my goodness. I have to put some movies for you to watch on your cultural horizon expansion list. He's an outstanding actor. Very, very good actor. I want you to go to Setting Up the Palette on page 69, and I want to talk about changing reading habits. There's something that's really important, and I just want you to get in the habit. We've stumbled across some words today, and I know that's going to happen, and I want to remind you of what students in the past have said to me about reading. Things I can't believe. One student in a reading class said, and I've seen other teachers try this too in other disciplines, I really have seen this happen, but in a reading class, close your eyes, and when you open them, you're going to read better. I tried it. I didn't read any better. My husband plays in a symphony orchestra, and his conductor one time asked him to work with the brass section and said, "You know how to get those musicians better?" This is a true story. "You tell them to close their eyes. And when they open them, they're going to play better." It didn't work any better in music than it did in reading, so pass on that one. And then another student in a reading class said, "Well, my teacher said, if I see a word such as apothecary, for example, and I don't know what it means, it must not be important." No. So I want you to cancel these two habits. Don't subscribe to the close your eyes method. Take my word for it. It doesn't work. And don't buy the if I don't know what it means, it's probably not important anyway, because that's not true either. So this is what I want you to get in the habit of doing. And before I start, we looked up several words right here in the last hour. We looked up apothecary. Just a couple of minutes ago, we looked up plague. We looked up infested. We looked up quarantine. And I don't know what words you're going to have troubles with, but I don't care what words you're going to have troubles with. I want you to get in the habit, whether you're reading the San Jose Mercury News, I'm serious about that, or these textbooks, or your textbook for history, or your textbook for anthropology or biology, or whatever it is. Circle it, arrow it to the margin, and follow this procedure. First of all, of course, circle it. Okay? And then you're going to arrow it to the margin. And then you're going to look in the glossary in the back of the book. I tried to second guess you, and I might be right. Well, sometimes I might not be right, because there might be words that I didn't figure you'd have trouble with. Then you don't say give up, you go to a real dictionary. But wherever you find it, let's start with the glossary, you read the definition the first time to get a basic understanding of what the word means. Now, Vince a minute ago read the definition of, what was it, plague, and it was kind of long. You don't want to have to write that whole, the quarantine. You don't want to have to write that whole thing down. So you read it once and you say, okay. And then you try it a second time and you try to get a short, accurate definition. Short, accurate definition in that case was enclosed area preventing disease. That's 4 words. If we tried, we could probably get it down to even less. And then the trick is you write the condensed definition alongside of the circled word. You reread the sentence again, and then you go on to the next example. And that's the intelligent way for you to expand your vocabulary. Does anybody have a question about that at all? I suggested to you the other day a supplemental exercise, and a supplemental and a suggestion is not a mandate, but this is what I asked you to do. We were talking about laying out the text on page 51. And I said, set up a theme, such as things you want to do this weekend, and see if you can't write 5 examples that fit each of the possible variations. There are 6 in total for the simple sentence, which would give you a total of 30. And I said, these were the first 2 that you'd come across. A simple sentence that has just one subject, just one verb. I would put that kind of a heading on the computer, or in your book, better yet, and write it out and mark it right on the spot. If I asked you, Justin, to give me a simple sentence with one subject and one verb about something you intend to do this weekend, what would you tell me?
I plan on going to the movies.
Okay, I plan on going to the movies. Where would your subject be?
I
How about your verb?
plan.
Yes. Anybody think his verb was anything else?
Plan to go.
Okay, I plan on going to the movies, you said.
Oh, okay.
And if I say, I plan going to the movies on, or I plan going on to the movies, it's not going to work, so your first answer was correct. If I asked you, Pippa, to give me a command, what would you say?
Look.
No, you can't use one we've already learned.
Okay.
What would you really like to have me do?
Stop.
Oh, I bet you can come up with a longer command than that.
Okay. Give me an A.
Your verb would be?
Give.
Your subject would be?
Implied you.
Yes. Jerry, if I said, give me a simple sentence that has more than one subject and more than one verb, what would you say?
give me your wallet, your keys, and your address.
Did he give me a sentence that had more than one subject and more than one verb? Where's your
No.
verb?
Give.
Where's your subject?
You.
You gave me 3 objects. That's not what
Yeah,
I
you're
asked
right.
for.
I did.
What I want, Ben, is more than one subject and more than one verb.
Jack and Jill went up the hill.
Well, I got more than one subject, but I've only got one verb.
And they went back down the hill.
No, hang on. We all know about Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill went up the hill and did what?
To fetch a pail of water.
But if I say went up the hill to fetch a pail of water, where's your subject?
The pail.
No, not the pail. Jack and Jill went up the hill to, I'm taking your sentence as you gave it to me, to fetch a pail of water. Your subjects are?
Jack and Jill.
Where's your verb?
Fetch.
No, to fetch, you said. Where's his verb, Ben? Sorry, Jeff. You know this. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Where's your subject? We need nursery rhyme review. Scott, where's the subject?
Went?
The subject is went? Kim, where's the subject?
Oh, Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill, where's your verb?
Went.
Went. I asked for more than one verb. If I wanted more than one verb, what would you say? Instead of to fetch, you would say Jack and Jill went up the hill. I'm waiting.
To run, to play.
That isn't to run to play isn't going to do it for me. I want
and
that pail of water.
And
Fetched a pail of water. Exactly. Can I have an inverted sentence, Farrah, where the verb comes before the subject? You're working at it. Jessica, can I have an inverted sentence where the verb comes in front of the subject?
Did you go to the mall?
No, that's a question. Yes, it is inverted. I'll buy that. Did you go to the mall? It's an inverted question. Turn it around for me.
You did go to the mall?
So your subject is?
You.
And your verb?
Did.
More?
Go.
Go. Good. Okay. Very good, people. I think you're coming along. Would you say this is a clearer understanding than you had in the last lecture? And maybe if we go back one earlier than that. So we're going to finish everything we have to say about simple sentences in the next lecture, and you're going to be ready for a major exam. Any burning questions? Whoa, look at that surprised look, Jeff. Very surprised look. Anybody want to say something? Anybody want to ask something? Yes, Yvonne.
How did Vermeer pay Brett? Agreed.
He didn't. He gave her lodging, and where she had to sleep in that room in the cellar with the painting of the crucifixion that she had to hang her apron over because she couldn't stand to look at it. So she was given food, and she was given money, a very small amount of money. And she took that money every Sunday when she could back to the family, right? And the family still made soups with no meat. They hadn't had meat for months. That's where that butcher comes back into the story. And maybe only a potato to make potato water soup. They had to live on that because the father could not work. And the brother was away being an unwilling apprentice at a pottery making factory. Very unwilling. He hated the work. He didn't have the love for clay that his father did.
So Vermeer was just as poor.
Oh, Vermeer was terrible. If he couldn't
Breed's
pay his
family,
bill,
that's what I was
absolutely,
asking.
for 3 years and owed for 8,000 loaves of bread. Can you imagine how many loaves of bread 8,000 would be? He was in very bad shape. Okay, people, we are done, and we'll continue with this discussion on Vermeer in the next lecture.